Tonight, we're very fortunate to be Stephen Carpenter II presenting tonight that the Art Ed Department has brought to our campus. A lot of shout outs for Art Ed. Very cool. Alright, so all the Art Ed people are going to be here next week to see a painter, right? So Maria Tomasula is presenting next week. So please, everyone come next week. A lot of art students here, a lot of UWM students, but hopefully a lot of people from the general public. I say it time and time again, but spread the news, spread the word, make this an open and inviting people to all. It's one of the premier contemporary artists lecture series in the city. So spread the news. They're free and open to the public. I see a couple people from the nebulous world of art and environmental activism in the audience tonight. So, good to see you and welcome. I have to say I try not to hype up any lecture, but I can't help it tonight. This is just very important to have an artist address an issue that's so near and dear to many of us. And prior to this class, on Wednesdays at 4, I teach a class called Art and Ecology. And a lot of the work we're looking at is looking at fresh water. And we are at the epicenter in Milwaukee. Milwaukee is trying to reinvent itself as a freshwater capital. UWM, the Great Lakes Water Institute, is becoming the premier institute for looking at issues of fresh water. Artists are behind the ball. It's one of the most important issues in the world. And there's a handful of artists that are addressing this key issue that impacts everyone around the world. And our guest tonight is one of the handful of important artists that is making the thesis of this work looking at issues of water. I mean, just looking at the World Health Organization statistics, 20% of the world's population live in areas where water is scarce. 1.1 billion people lack any access to clean water. When we talk about human history, the issues that matter, what shapes the world, water is becoming it. And here we're at the greatest center of fresh water, right? Western Hemisphere. Yet it's also a resource that's threatened constantly. And so it is with great delight to pass over the mic to Christine Wogan, right? For pronouncing it right, who will introduce our guest. Thank you so much for bringing this up.
Dr. Stephen Carpenter holds a BFA degree in Visual Arts from Slippery Rock University and Master's and PhD degrees in Art Education from Penn State University. Previously, he's held faculty positions at Texas A&M University, Virginia Commonwealth University, and Old Dominion University. Currently, he's professor in charge of Art Education at Penn State University. Dr. Carpenter is the author of numerous scholarly articles that have appeared in journals such as Art Education, Ceramics, Art and Perception, Educational Leadership, the Journal of Aesthetic Education, the Journal of Educational Multimedia and Hypermedia, Studies in Art Education, and Visual Arts Research. He has also authored numerous book chapters in Art Education, Visual Culture, and Curriculum Theory. In addition, he's a co-author of interdisciplinary approaches to teaching art in high school, and co-editor of Curriculum for Progressive, Provocative, Poetic, and Public Pedagogy. His mixed media installations and performance artworks have been displayed in regional, national, and international exhibitions. Dr. Carpenter was also editor of Art Education, the Journal of the National Art Education Association, and is co-editor of the Journal of Curriculum and Pedagogy. His funded projects include, but are not limited to, the Texas Governor's School in Art and Humanities for Urban Leadership, the Ensemble Computing Portal, the Texas A&M University Water Project, and the Reservoir Studio. Please welcome scholar and water activist Dr. Stephen Carpenter II.
Thank you, Christine.
Go Pack, go.
Oh, thank you. Go where?
Go Pack. The Packers.
Go Packers. I'm from Steeler country, so I gotta be careful with who I say go to. Like, we'll go Packers. Hey, go Packers. Thank you, Art Education Program. Thank you, Art and Design. Thank you, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Thank you. This is amazing. So, you know, it's interesting when people introduce you and they don't mean to hype people up, but then they do, right? And then they give you these introductions. Actually, you have to be the person that they introduce. And it's always, I always have like a couple of seconds of fear that set in, like, oh, who is that person? When are they going to stand up and start talking? I guess that point is now. Well, I'm at Penn State University. I've been there for a year. Previously, I was at Texas A&M University in College Station, Texas. And so much of the work that I'm going to talk about tonight related to the water filter project that I've been working on originated there, started in a garage. So it's very much like a garage band that I've been working with. But really thrilled with the music that we've been making and the directions that the work is taking. So without any more of this clumsy intro, here we go. It is February, and so I figured I need to acknowledge the fact that it's February. It's also the month where we have Valentine's Day. It's also the shortest month of the year. Even when you add that extra day every 4 years, it's still the shortest day of the year. Well, I think I forgot to mention I'm a troublemaker too. Because I see things and then I have to like talk about it, or I see things I have to make visual responses to what I see happening in the world. So this image, this chalkboard, looks like an eye chart on an old school tablet. You know, most folks have iPad tablets. This is like the original iPad. It's like an iPad. So this is a work I did a number of years ago. And the work is called I Love You Once a Year, My Funny Valentine. I find it really interesting that we have like this corporate backing to let people know how much we love them. But it's like in the shortest month of the year. But at the same time, that's a month that we set aside for certain people who have extra melanin in their skin as a historical curriculum for 28, sometimes 29 days. I don't know, I like loving people all year, every day, but so this work has not always been received with hugs and kisses, but this is my Valentine from February, and the other symbolism that it entails in terms of not just the history of certain peoples, but the history of every single person who's ever set foot on this continent. It's a history, it's a month about our collective history, not just a single group of people who have been constructed in terms of their identity by others. All right, so being a troublemaker, I also make works of art that don't actually have anything to do with me making the stuff that's there, except for the wooden cage component of this work. This is a piece that was been in a few shows recently. It's called Not My Cup of Tea. And it's a construction like the other work, like many of the works that I create. It's a construction from found objects, from objects in the world that have certain meanings, certain signification. And I'm really interested in recontextualizing, taking works, taking objects, taking ideas from comfortable, assumed, conventional context and repurposing them. And in doing that, you cause trouble. You critique. Once you put one thing next to something else, they critique each other. I'm a very tall person. All 5 feet 8 inches. I'm very tall. And I can show you how tall I am when I get my 3-year-old daughter standing next to me. I'm very tall.
but a 7-foot-tall basketball player standing next to me, I'm not as tall as I was before. So in each of those cases, our bodies critique the other bodies in terms of juxtaposition, by virtue of juxtaposition. So if you want to better know something, you put it in juxtaposition with something else, and then you start to create meaning. And so this construction, not my cup of tea, falls into that category. So these are the kinds of works that I've been creating in the past few years, these objects that sit on pedestals or sit in spaces where people have to visit, and then they leave those objects in those spaces. But those aren't the only kinds of objects that I create, nor are the only kinds of constructions that I create. Because I create constructions like this too. This is curriculum. Those of you who are education people, art education folks, people who have ever been subjected to a curriculum, if you've ever been a student or a teacher, this is how I see curriculum. Visual learner, that's me. I have a hard time seeing things in a very narrow, singular, linear fashion. There are always multiple narratives going on, like when you walk into Target or Best Buy or someplace and all the TVs are on the wall and they have like multiple TV shows going at the same time. That's how the world kind of functions in my head. So we'll come back to this image a little later. So tonight I want to talk about issues of artistic intervention. I want to talk about issues of curriculum and issues of public pedagogy. And curriculum is typically centered around questions. Curriculum can be phrased in this notion of dealing with a big question: what is worth knowing? At least that's what Tyler used to talk about. But more recently, people like Bill Schubert have said, what is worthwhile is a more valuable question to deal with. So as we think about some of the issues I'm going to bring up tonight, thinking about what is worth knowing is a valuable question. But what is worthwhile, I think, is another way to think, is another way to consider curriculum and the engagement of learning. So these questions that you see behind me are questions that I've generated, my students and I have generated. We kind of boiled them down, pun intended, to have just something to grasp, something to consider. Certainly these aren't the only questions we can ask. These aren't the only questions we can consider. But I'm really interested in questions as the central point of curriculum, not destinations, not necessarily singular answers, but questions that allow us to go in divergent and generative ways. I love this image too. I've got to find a reason to use this warning sign, right? Like, you rarely see this warning sign. And if you see it on the highway, it's really something bad is going to happen. And it's not a question mark, it's like an exclamation, like they're yelling at you.
Don't jump off the cliff.
Call and response. So there's a call. There's a call out in the world. There's a call out in the world. Little children, thirsty. Want some water? All right, go get some water. You can have a drink of water. Here's a little girl in Honduras. Her sisters or friends go where they always go to get water, down at the river. Same place that the cows drink water. Same place that the cows deposit the water after they've rented it in their bodies for a while. And other things that they've rented. Same place that people wash their clothes. Same place that folks throw away trash. This little girl's just drinking the water she drinks every single day, just like you do, right? Go to the river and get a bottle of water to drink. This gentleman is getting water for his family. This gentleman is in Texas. He's on the U.S. side of Texas. I'm saying that specifically because a lot of people, when I say he's in Texas, they say, oh, you must be mistaken. He's probably south of the river. No, he's north of the river. He's an American citizen. This guy is getting water for his family. Notice his pickup truck has these two containers in the back, and he's drives his truck up and puts some coins in this machine, this vending machine for water. Interesting thing is that the containers that they sell in that part of Texas, even if you got 2 containers the size of that white cube that's there, you wouldn't be able to hold the amount of water that comes out of that machine, because a certain volume comes out, and at a certain point when the 2 containers are full, the water keeps running. There's no off switch. The machine turns itself off. So whenever you want to get water, you're going to be paying for less water than you can actually take home. So then, the question becomes, how does he get that water into his house? Pretty tough to carry that big container of water into his kitchen. So there's a lot of creative ways, putting a sump pump into one of those containers and then having a tube go up into your house, into your kitchen. But that water is touched at least 4 different receptacles before it gets to the one that is in the back of his truck. Heard some statistics earlier. 1% of the water on the earth is potable. If you had 100 cups of water to represent all the water in the world, only one of those cups would you want to drink, or would you be able to gain access to drink? 1%. We have 100 people in this room, maybe? Only one of you would we want to drink. The others, yeah. I don't know how that metaphor works. 2% of the water on Earth is trapped in the polar ice caps. You could probably drink that. It's going to take a while. Some shaved ice, got to wait for it to melt. It's kind of difficult to travel to the polar ice caps every time you want some fresh water, unless you live in Antarctica. The remaining 97% of the water on Earth is salt water. Not the kind of water you really want to drink. And quite difficult to recycle, quite difficult to render potable. 1%. So the water that you drink at the fountain, the water that you get in bottles, the water that you spray on your grass or on your vegetables when you wash them, that's all part of the 1%. We are the 99%. This is the 1%. Water. It's a hydrant. It's a photograph I took in France. So, French water. 1.1 billion people worldwide. That's 1 in 6. Don't have access to clean water. Not that they don't want it. They want the access. They just don't have the access. 1 in 6. Almost 2 million children. 1.8 that's a big number. I like to say almost 2 million kids die every single year. Every 15 seconds, a different child dies. It's not acceptable to me. That's a number I don't want to accept. Almost 5.5 billion. See how 5.3 billion is not, almost 5.5 billion. 2/3 of the world's population will suffer from water shortages 13 years from now. In 13 years. In 13 years, 2/3 of the world's population will suffer from shortages of water. $3 billion people are expected to be added to the world population by 2050, but 90% will live in places where they don't have sustainable access to drinkable water. What? That can't be right. I could just walk out into the hallway and get it. Doesn't everybody have it? No. Won't everybody? No. Wars have been, are, and will continue to be fought over water. You know, Florida and South Carolina and Georgia are fighting over water rights. It's not a them, it's not an overseas kind of issue, it's a domestic issue. And I know you're very aware of these kinds of issues in this area. That was the call. What's the response, right? Call and response. Got to bring some music into this. Well, almost all cultures in the world have clay as part of their heritage. I think the Hawaiians are the only folks that don't. And that's because those volcanic islands haven't been old enough to render themselves clay. Like all cultures have some sort of connection to clay. It's kind of cool. Potters for Peace. I love that name. Potters for Peace. Potters are going to be about something. It better be about peace. Potters for aggressive adjectives. That doesn't. So Potters for Peace started to refine a technique to create filters out of clay after Hurricane Mitch devastated central parts of Central America. There's a lot of water. Salt water, yeah, but there was a lot of fresh water, but it was gray water. It was nasty water because it was sitting for a while. But it wasn't drinkable because that hurricane did a lot of damage. Potters for Peace has a model to create filters very inexpensively out of clay, combustible materials, and magic fairy dust. I'll tell you about that magic fairy dust in a second. And these facilities that Potters for Peace helped set up turn into micro-enterprises, so they become local corporations. I know there's a lot of talk in this country about jobs. There's a lot of talk in other countries about jobs too. Micro-enterprises, macro-enterprises, Starship Enterprise. I mean, a lot of folks, enterprises, you know, these are important places. There's another group that I'm aware of and interested in and connected with in some way, and that's Filter Pure. And they're based out of the Dominican Republic. And they have a similar facility, a similar approach, but it's slightly different. And in 2010, when the earthquake hit Haiti on the other side of the island, Filter Pure ramped up their production and drove filters from one side of the island over to the other. Now they're setting up facilities in Haiti, in conjunction with other groups such as Wine to Water. Filter Pure is doing some pretty amazing stuff. And so while I don't have a direct official affiliation with either of these groups, Potters for Peace or Filter Pure, I have an affiliation with them because I've spoken with, learned from, talked to, and in cahoots with both groups. Because even if we were to make filters nonstop 24 hours a day, our groups and the other groups around the world who are making these filters, it's not enough. It's not enough. But if we stop, that's the shame. That's the part that would be really sad. So, very simple. Cross-sectional drawing by an amazing gentleman, Manny Hernandez. He's a professor for a long time at Northern Illinois University. Now he just travels around the world helping people get clean water and clean and efficient cook stoves. A very simple approach to creating clean water. This is a appropriate technology using local indigenous materials, sustainable materials, and trying to keep the cost very low. So on one hand, people have water, but how clean is the water to drink? On the other hand, you have this approach, this technique that's very, very inexpensive, very easy to do. And the thing that I love the most is that I learned this from artists, and potters, not the politicians. Politicians don't seem to be interested in affordable, low-cost approaches for people to get clean water. I don't know. I'd vote for somebody who was interested in that. But most politicians don't seem to be interested in that. Intervention, to enter into a venue, to go into a space, to disrupt, to cause trouble. Good kind of trouble. Three people I call superheroes, or folks that I want to be like, or I want to be when I grow up. Buster Simpson, upper left, balancing the pH in the Hudson River by taking huge Alka-Seltzer tablets and dumping this a top-down view. So you see his head, he's like dropping his feet. It's not really Alka-Seltzer, but it is a limestone tablet. And limestone functions to balance pH in rivers. So he's like giving the river an Alka-Seltzer to cure the water's, upset stomach. Or Mel Chin created this work called Revival Field. Sometimes the soil is not so healthy, so you can actually plant plants that can heal the soil. And he's been working with plants called hyper-accumulators. Plants that take the metals, the toxic metals, out of the earth. And it nurtures, it helps to grow the plants, and the soil is cleaned of those toxic metals. And then he says, okay, then what you do is you put those plants into a furnace, and you smelt them down, and then you can use the metal. Art people, artists, doing some thinking. Natalie Jeremijenko. Oh my goodness, I think I want to be her when I see her. The health clinic, the environmental health clinic. Imagine an environment that is ill. If you were ill, you would take somebody, you want somebody to take you to the health clinic. So what if an environmental space was ill? Take it to the environmental health clinic. Jeremijenko is a professor at NYU, and she's one of the folks, she's an artist, she's in digital media, she's like, talk about interdisciplinary, I think she has her foot in every single department at NYU. But as an artist, she's part of this environmental health clinic, and people who have problems with the environmental location where they are, they show up to the health clinic, and they don't call the people who show up patients. A patient goes to a health clinic. You go to the environmental health clinic, you are an impatient, because you want action now. And they write you a prescription, not for you, the person, but a prescription for the environment. I love it. These artists thinking like this, right? I want to be all three of them when I grow up. But for right now, I'm just this guy. In my garage in Texas. Yes, those are mini Nerf footballs. Bought them at the dollar store, cut them in half, put a little coil clay around them, cast them in plaster. They look just like the big size water filters. Hand mold clay there. And when I go to elementary schools or middle schools and I want to do a demo, I don't take the 7-foot-tall steel press, hydraulic press, ram press that looks like a guillotine. No, it's not a guillotine. Take these plaster molds, and little kids can make filters right before your eyes. And the technology works on a small scale as well as a larger scale. Three important folks who, I guess I could be like them too if I grew up, or when I grew up. Richard Lukic, bottom left, he was my professor at Slippery Rock. Manny Hernandez, I mentioned, he was at Northern Illinois. The guy at the top is Ron Rivera. Ron was the director of the ceramic water filter program with Potters for Peace, and one year, a few years ago, he was in Nigeria, I believe, doing what he would do all the time, working with folks who needed clean water. They asked him to come over. He wasn't colonizing, he wasn't imposing himself on folks. None of these folks that I'm talking to you about do that. Folks who need clean water approach them. And so Ron was helping folks set up a water filter facility so that they could deal with this water that was readily available but was filled with like malaria-causing agents. Ron contracted malaria, the same strain of malaria that they were trying to prevent, and he died. He died helping people get clean water so they wouldn't die of malaria. If that's not heroic, I don't know what it is. So whenever I talk about this work, I have to mention Ron's name, and it's always tough to mention his name. I met him about 6 months before he passed away, and I'm just very fortunate to have done that. I feel honored. So this is a work, this is a sculpture that Manny Hernandez made. It's like an exploded view of the filter. So you see this plastic bucket, Then you see this conical filter at the top, and he exhibits this thing in art shows and puts water in. It drives the docents crazy because they have to replenish the water. And it drips, it goes whoop, 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 throughout the show. Then they have to change the water and fill the bucket. It's really kind of interesting. But it's a great way to demonstrate the process and to demonstrate the technology, but at the same time construct this, act as a sculpture within this space. So appropriate technology is technology that uses whatever you have, whatever is appropriate. And so working with, I don't want to say low technology, but appropriate. So if you don't have electricity, you might have a big tarp. If you don't have a tarp, get a sheet. If you don't have a sheet, well, just get a big old bucket. But this is how we've been mixing clay. See, 50% clay, 50% sawdust. There's Dr. Angela Cornelius. She was a grad student at the time. See in my garage? That's my garage. You walk through that door, you walk right down the hallway into my kitchen. It's right there. You walk this thing back and forth, it mixes the sawdust and clay together. So if you don't have a cement mixer or a clay mixer in the clay studio, you can do this. It works very easily. I skipped over a couple stages. This is the guillotine, right? And that orange thing in the middle is a car jack, a 12-ton hydraulic car jack. You don't really need 12 tons, but it's kind of nice to have that. You see that extra power. Manny Hernandez designed this, and he worked with a welder to design this and then build it. Manny has designed kilns and presses for potters for peace and filtered pure, so learning directly from the master. You can fire these in electric kilns, but you can also fire them in gas kilns, in wood kilns, in oil kilns, any kind of kiln that's going to hold heat for a long enough period of time will do. We fire this up to bisque temperature, 900 degrees centigrade for those of you on the Celsius scale. And essentially, this filter is created in this process that I mentioned, right? Sawdust, clay. This is Brian Boulanger. He's a civil engineer at Texas A&M. And he's the guy that helps test the water quality. There I am showing you my wedging skills. So we add water to this thing. Get your hands dirty. Very simple process. Put this ring on. Crank it down. Crank the press. Raise it up. You filter, you gotta wait for it to dry. But you pour this water in, and it filters 1 to 2 liters an hour. And if you have water that was, well, for example, in this video, the water that you see me pouring into the filter was sitting in my backyard in Texas in June. Texas in June. Okay, just imagine how hot that is. Water that had not evaporated but was still sitting, so it's deep enough in the backyard puddle, for 3 days. Can you imagine what's growing in there? The mosquitoes and the others and the cats and obviously weird stuff in there. The filter, that filter that you see, I poured the water in there. That's real water. We did 9 takes, right? Pouring the water in there, and I'm drinking the actual, that glass came from my kitchen, but that water came from a puddle in my backyard that had been sitting there for 3 days in June in Texas. And look at it, it comes out 95% free of bacteria causing agents, microbes, nasty little critters that cause E. coli and malaria and all this stuff. Now, the magic fairy dust that I mentioned, silver, nano-sized particles of silver, colloidal silver. You mix that in about 500 milliliters of water and you coat, or you add about 500 milliliters of that water with the nano-sized particles of silver onto that filter. You know what happens? 99% of the disease-causing agents, the microbes, all the nasty little living things, rendered inert. Starts at 99%. What? That bottled water that you might have had today or might be drinking now, I don't know if that's 99%. I'm just sharing with you. I don't know. It might be. I'm just not sure. I know the filters do that. I know you clean them out regularly for 3 or 4 years. You can have clean water, and 95% free of those agents. Now, remember that little girl in Honduras? Remember the water she was drinking? That's 100%. She's going to get diseases. She's going to have diarrhea in a few days. Because she has diarrhea like twice a month because of that water, among other things. And other folks die because of malaria and E. coli and other stuff. I'll take the 95%. I'll take the 99%. So the Tamu Water Project. Started this when I was at A&M in my garage, so this is the name of our garage band. But I'm at Penn State now. That's a new story. That's a different story. So imagine 500,000 people who do not have access to utilities, roads, or housing that's up to code. My buddy Oscar Munoz is director of the Colonias program at Texas A&M. He works with those folks every single day. And in conjunction with him, in the College of Architecture, and my buddy Brian Boulanger in civil engineering, we started the Tamu Water Project. And it is quite the interdisciplinary experience. We had 2 master's students who worked with us over the 4 years that I was there actually working on this and working hard, who did their master's theses related to the water project. One in civil engineering, and one in art education. I'm sorry, in curriculum and instruction. We didn't have art ed per se. We had curriculum and instruction. I was on both of those theses. Brian was on both of those. Having a civil engineer on a curriculum and instruction art education thesis, that's pretty amazing. But what I think is cool is having an art guy on an engineering thesis, that's even more amazing. And what blows my mind is that the medical school, the Texas A&M Health Science Center, the medical school, got wind of what we were up to. And they approached myself, they approached me, and they approached Brian. They said, would you like to be affiliate members of the medical school? I said, heck yeah. So I'm an art guy, and I'm an affiliate member of a medical school. What? That doesn't make sense in anybody's universe, but this one. I think that's pretty amazing. I think that's pretty amazing stuff. So what can you do with an art degree? Pretty much anything you want. That's what I tell parents. That's what I tell students. The limits of what you can do as an artist are up to you, not up to society. So here's Oscar. It's an evil-looking picture, isn't it? We're up to something. There's Brian. Now, Brian looks like he's saying, what? But he was actually just moving out of the way. That's my garage. Have I said that enough? I mean, we did this out in my garage. We trained people in my garage so well that when the earthquake hit Haiti, Filtered Pure sent out an email. Please help, we need volunteers to come down. We were able to fund several students and Brian to fly down to the Dominican Republic, walk right into that space and help them with their production of kiln bricks and preparation to send those filters over to Haiti. In my garage, they learned how to do that. Reservoir student. So I'm now at Penn State. I was at A&M for 6.5 years. Last January, I started at Penn State. I didn't give up the water project or the filter work. I'm still affiliated with the Tamu Water Project. But at Penn State, you leave your band, you got to start a new gig, right? You might go solo, you might start a new group. So this is my new group. But I actually have space in the basement of the Arts Cottage, like one of the old yellow buildings on campus. But it's in the basement, so it's underground, right? And it leaks. So when it rains or there's heavy snow, the snow melts, like water is dripping, which is kind of appropriate for this water project. So it's literally an underground collective. So Calling it the reservoir makes sense because a reservoir is an underground collective typically, right? But it's an interdisciplinary collective. Transdisciplinary. We have engineers. We have medical students. We have international policy students. Civil engineers, energy engineers, art education folks, you name it, folks are there. The associate dean has come down to help out. What? Okay. One of the curators at the museum. Huh? Yeah. You want to make water filters? Come on. I'm open to that. Cool thing about us doing this on campus is that it's not in my garage. And so I don't have to be there when stuff is going on. And my family is, they don't get the weird looks anymore from the neighbors because I have like 8 to 10 or 12 trucks parked in front of my house in Texas. And my neighbors knew we were up to something weird in my garage. So what does this have to do with curriculum? Well, this is a photograph from the Laredo area of Texas. And if you can't read that sign, it says Salsa Puedes. I don't really speak Spanish. But what I know of Spanish is that Salsa Puedes roughly means get out if you can. Get out if you can. Leave if you can. I find this image interesting because that road looks like it goes in a circle. Salsa Puedes Road is in one of the colonias outside of Laredo. The colonias are those places that I told you about that Oscar Munoz works with, folks that do not have paved roads, that do not have electricity, that do not have social services, that do not have adequate access to water. The gentleman you saw with that pickup truck lives in one of the colonia. In the state of Texas. Are you listening? I'm speaking slowly because I want you to understand what I'm saying. In the state of Texas, there are at least 500,000, I like saying it that way because it sounds like a horror movie, 500,000 people who do not have adequate access to clean water in their homes. Do you realize it's mathematically possible to stuff 500,000 people into the Empire State Building? Mathematically, you can do that. What's the population of Milwaukee?
596,000.
500 and how many?
96.
So you take away 96, the 96 part? That's like almost the entire city of Milwaukee lacking adequate access to clean water in their homes. That is unacceptable. Salsa Puedes, leave if you can. Curriculum is built on this Latin word, currere, which means to run. It's the infinitive to run the course. It's not the course. Curriculum is not a noun. If we're going to be radical, here we go. Radical, that's rad. Radish, radius, center, or root. Whoa. If you're being radical, you're going to the root. You're not going to the extreme. Well, you are going to the extreme because your root is so far away from my center that it is at the margin of my center. So your center is my margin. But if you're being radical, you're actually going to the root. So going to the root, I'm being radical here, going to the root. Curriculum is a verb. It's not the course, it's the running of the course. It's the experience of the course. So how in the world yes, I'm saying this in public and on videotape. How in the world do we expect to predict the future and set up educational experiences for people so sure that we know how they're going to be able to use this in the future when we can't predict the future? But what we can do for people in terms of curriculum, this is my belief and my perspective as a curriculum theorist, but I'm not alone in this. John Dewey was saying this almost 100 years ago, as have other folks. This idea of engaging people in ways to think about thinking, to think about educational experience. Curriculum theory is roughly defined as the interdisciplinary interpretation of educational experience. The interdisciplinary interpretation of educational experience. So it's through experiences that we gain means to deal with new experiences. But if we prepare people for very specific end goals, what if those very specific opportunities never show up in the future? Then folks are actually miseducated. The running of the course. What is the running of the course about? That is the curriculum. So you can have curricula of lots of things. Coffee, anybody go to coffee houses? That's the curriculum of a coffee house. The curriculum of water. So putting an emphasis on the running of the course is crucial. And Carrere wants us to look back and to look at the future and then to synthesize those as a means of more complete understanding. This is not my work. This is Bill Pine, work of Bill Piner, Madeline Brumet, and other scholars who have looked at curriculum in these ways. Patrick Slattery, one of my friends and fellow troublemakers in the world, says curriculum development in the postmodern era demands. He doesn't say should politely ask. Right? He says it demands that we find a way around the hegemonic forces and institutional obstacles that limit knowledge, reinforce prejudice, and that disconnect us from the global community. Those are the things that we need to take on head on. Not to push to the sides, but to put them in the center. To be radical and move them to the center, to your root. And it's the experience of dealing with working around those hegemonic forces and obstacles and prejudices. That is where curriculum needs to be. I'm all for that. Art educators have talked about this. Carrie Friedman, Arthur Eflin, Patricia Sturr have mentioned these ideas as well. I love this part. Focusing on content selection to heighten points of conflict. What? Yeah. Your classroom, your curriculum, the educational experiences that we engage students in should center on conflict. I'm not talking fisticuffs and bar fights. Conflict that needs to be worked out and that might not be resolved easily. It's that experience of working it out and working through it. All right, let me zip through some of this. So, curricula related to this water project can come in multiple ways. For example, a traditional production center. So if you take clay ceramic classes, you can create works in ceramic art. These are receptacles. The plastic buckets work great, but ceramic artists know how to make receptacles that will hold the filters. You can put those on display. We've done this. We've curated shows that have traveled around the country. You go to different sites. People can buy those works out of the exhibition. The money from the sales of those works go back to the production of the water filters. Then when it goes to a new place, the people curating that exhibition commission new works that are essentially donated to the exhibition. And they go on to create more work and more revenue. This is a part of a public pedagogy project that we did at Texas A&M. I'll say a little bit more about that. But this notion of the artworks, the concepts, and the ideas are also curricular. So the ways in which we engage in those components in terms of either a concept-based or an interdisciplinary curriculum in classrooms or studios. And another component. You see Manny Hernandez on the right. And this is curriculum. The third way might be a skills-based or technology-based curriculum. The experience of learning these technologies, not as endpoints, but as ways of understanding the concepts of those technologies to move them forward. And then a curriculum of social issues and action. Not just social issues and awareness, but social issues and action, the action that is taken. Not just the awareness that is raised, although it's important to raise awareness in certain contexts. I'm also interested in the action that we might be able to take through such a curriculum. Many curricula look like this. You can map curricula, right? This is actually a big piece of butcher paper on the floor of my garage. Yes, I'm going to based on 3 basic questions. What do you want students to know, understand, and do? Whatever evidence are you willing to accept as proof that they know it? And then what skills, activities, and experiences are you going to give them to demonstrate to you the knowledge that you're willing to accept? This is from a backwards design model. But mapping it out is pretty easy and straightforward. And this was a 5-day season, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday and Saturday is like a half day. That was a week-long water camp that we designed on the floor of my garage on butcher paper. And we taught for 2 straight summers to middle school kids in El Paso. Or a curriculum can look like this. That's just multi-layered butcher paper. There's that little girl again. There's the guy from the Colonias. There's Val Cushing, the Great Wave from Hokusai. Here are some of the partners. Here are some of the interdisciplinary players in the Reservoir Studio. HESI, I love this, humanitarian engineering and social entrepreneurship. Or ELDM, engineering leadership. Both in the College of Engineering. They come to the reservoir. Engineering students come to the reservoir to work on various components of their research and then take it out to other disciplines, to places that I can't or won't or shouldn't. Right? And my students can't or won't or shouldn't. We're working on projects in Kenya. We're working with Filter Pure in the Dominican Republic. We're still working with A&M in Texas. Real fast, I guess we're supposed to finish in about 5 minutes. So let me show you. We're good? Public pedagogy. 2 of my favorite words. You gotta be careful though when you're typing the word public in spell check. Because that word, if that letter L is not there, you're talking about some other stuff. Public pedagogy. The public is usually out there, right? Taking it out to the public. Why is education ever supposed to be separated from, well, we have public education, but public education is education for the public or for, means it's not private, right? I want to turn that around a bit. And this notion of pedagogy, the theory and practice of teaching and learning. Some people call it the practice, but for me the pedagogy is the embodiment in your teaching, and the embodiment in engaging students in learning, the embodiment of your theories of teaching and learning through your engaged practice. So how do we make public, or take to the public, or perform in public pedagogy? I'm not the only person dealing with this. There are books written on public pedagogy. Save the date. Friday the 13th, 2012. Somewhere on the campus of Penn State University. Supported with a generous grant from the Institute for the Arts and Humanities, the Reservoir Studio is coming your way. Remember that guillotine I showed you? We're going to take that out in the public, in the middle of campus, and make water filters. 9 to 5 is a work day, right? I mean, a stereotypical, generic work day. We've worked hard, just one day. I've worked at 9 to 5, making water filters. What difference in the world might we make? I build this as performance art, It's public pedagogy. And the Institute for Arts and Humanities at Penn State said, sure. And they gave me money to do this. I love that. I've done this before at Texas A&M. We took the guillotine, not the guillotine, we took the press, front of the gallery. The gallery actually housed an exhibition of the ceramic water filters, but we also had didactic text about the global water crisis. But in front of the gallery, we set up this public pedagogy performance, production of water filters. We mixed clay. Some of those folks I'd never met before in my life. They just walked up, said, what? You're making clay thing? You're mixing clay in the middle of campus? Folks stopped by to chat, help out. We made filters all day. We're going to do that at Penn State. My goal is to make 50 filters. Why 50? I don't know, because 60 seemed like too many. 50 seemed about right. Here I am again in the back. You see a Santa Claus looking guy. That's actually Dick Lukic. And we're at Cal State San Bernardino doing a very similar public pedagogy workshop. Came in as a visiting artist, and that's one of those little clay filters. Remember the Nerf footballs I showed you before? They fit very nicely inside quart-sized takeout containers you might get egg drop soup in. At least you can get them in Pennsylvania, so in Texas. We're in the clay studio doing demonstrations. And then we took it public. I love that picture. In the middle of the commons, I said, I need a big piece of tarp. They got like the biggest California-sized piece of tarp you could find. It's like a huge tent-sized tarp. And we started mixing clay in the middle of campus. 50% clay, 50% sawdust. You put wood in fire, it's going to burn. Sawdust burns out. It renders that filter porous, and we can regulate the size of those particles by sifting it or sieving it with really high-tech approaches called mosquito window screening. Add water, there's your clay. And we drew quite a crowd for several hours there. This is where I'm hoping to perform at Penn State. It's not official, so I'm not going to say the place publicly, but we're hoping that we're going to do it right here. But well, actually, I'll read some where it says Palmer Museum of Art. That's what it says on the door. I won't say where we're thinking of doing it, but that's what it says on the front door of that building. So these receptacles function on a very basic premise. A filter has to fit inside. A spigot has to be introduced near the bottom, perpendicular. You put it at this angle or at this angle, the water is either going to flow too fast or not flow at all. It's really important for some folks to understand how water works in that way. But after you have it in a lid, right, to keep all the larger debris out. But if you're an artist, your way is just another way to render a receptacle. And it's really amazing to see the kinds of work that artists produce, the kinds of receptacles that artists produce. And this traveling exhibition becomes a form of public pedagogy, because people go into the exhibit wanting to see these receptacles, and then they start to learn about the global water crisis. We have the statistics up, and we talk about issues of water, or lack of water access.
Most people don't think about where their water comes from. They just turn on the tap and they expect it to be there. Those days are ending. Humans are changing the climate. We already see evidence about it. One of the most significant impacts of climate change will be on our water resources.
This notion that we'll have water forever is wrong. The world is running out of fresh water. In the last 10 years, major water companies from Europe have started taking advantage of pollution and scarcity. Who owns water? Who gets to make the decisions about water?
Water privatization was forced on Bolivia by the World Bank.
Water is the most precious commodity for labor in the world. It's blue gold.
Water is a common resource. Water is not a property.
The water sector is going to grow 2 to 3 times the global economy over the next 20 years.
The market is amoral, and it's going to lead you to selling to those who can buy it and not to those who need it. They're spending
Selling water to those who can buy it and not to those who need it. What? That's the trailer for a film called Flow. For love of water. Look for it. Search for it online. Watch the film. If you want to be educated about it, consider more deeply the political, social, economic, humanitarian issues related to water or lack of access and privatization, political pawning that happens in terms of water, check out that film, Flow. This other clip is from a movie called Thirst. Play a little bit of this, more of this clip. No, maybe not. Let's go.
The world attention and eyes are focusing on us today as we witness the largest gathering dealing with one of the greatest challenges of the 21st century, fresh water.
This water is now in a stage of crisis, and due to the rapid increase of the world's population, this situation is expected to become even more serious.
So the challenge here is to provide access to all the unserved people at an affordable price.
I'm going to stop there. I wanted to stop a little bit earlier. So you can see this woman, these women carrying water. There are some places where girls don't go to school, not because they can't learn, but because culturally, they're the ones who get the water. They're the ones who have to walk miles each day. Not 1 mile, but maybe a couple miles in each direction to get water for their families. If you're walking several miles each day to get water, you don't have time to go to school. So the implications of water and access to water go beyond health issues. They're educational issues. There are generations of women and girls who don't go to school. There are boys who don't go to school too, but in many places the task is a gendered task, and so girls and women do those tasks. What? This is like unacceptable in some people's minds, not just Western minds, but also in the minds of folks who live in these contexts, right? But solutions are solutions. Somebody's got to get the water. So when you have kids, in some places it's mostly the girls, in some cases it's boys and girls. But you have kids who are not going to school because they have to get water. And the same communities are seeking ways to gain access to water. It becomes more than just quenching thirst. It becomes quenching thirst for knowledge. And these are also issues that are interesting to me. So as we engage with and consider this notion of water as curriculum, it's not just water as a substance, water as a thing, but water as an experience, an interdisciplinary experience, an interdisciplinary context that can be looked at, interpreted, regarded, worked through, discussed in multiple ways. And certainly there's more to talk about than I've touched on tonight, but I'm really hope that what I've mentioned helps you to further your thinking in these ways, but also to start further discussions, the critical kinds of discussions, the cultural discussions we need to have, political, economic, health issues, as well as artistic issues of what are the roles, what are the acceptable roles and expected roles for artists in the world. I'll just leave you with, that's a really long URL. You know? So you can follow me on Twitter, or you can drop me an email and I'll send you the URL, it might be easier. But I really appreciate you being here tonight. And this is Juan Galvan. He's a guy who lives in Laredo, and he's just a guy trying to make a difference. He's holding up the very first filter that we produced at A&M in public. And I see this as akin to people at Wimbledon holding up that trophy. Right? I mean, it's a legacy. It's a prize. And water. That's all I can say. Water is just an amazing commodity that we take for granted. But you know, it's kind of like being sick. You don't realize how good it feels when you're well until you're sick. So you take away water. See how good that water is when it's gone. Thanks. I don't know what the protocol is. What? Those questions? Okay. Questions? Yes.
So clearly there's a water crisis, and kind of coming from a first world perspective, we also see an oil crisis. Is there a way, or like, how would we be able to do what it is that you and other people are doing without relying on plastics?
Yeah, good question. So the question is, how can we do this kind of work with the filters without relying on plastic? Certainly we use plastic as the release agent, right? We use dry cleaner plastic or really small gauge plastic. There are the plastic receptacles, the spigots are plastic. You can actually make the receptacles without plastic, so we have ceramic artists who are doing that. So in places where you have a potters know how to make receptacles. You can actually make spigots out of wood, right? You think of Gilligan's Island, right? Right? Or, you know, think of Vermont. You can make syrup taps and trees with wood, so you can make taps and spigots out of wood. And then the release agent of plastic, you can use other materials. You can use cloth, you can use burlap, you can use lots of other things. Dry cleaner plastic is just kind of easy, like you said, in the first world context, but you can do this entire process without any plastic whatsoever. But it's a really important question. Let's go on this side of the aisle and back over here. Yeah.
Yes, I have two questions, and I'll make them as brief as I can. Is there, that you know of a way to mass produce these filters so that you can get as many out there to as many people who need them as fast as you can? And secondly, are there an organization, a charitable organization that's out there in the third world nations where people really, where the girls are going to get the water, that is helping to bring delivery systems, water delivery systems, so that people don't have to do that, so that these people can maybe focus on other things in their lives?
Yeah, good question. So the second one is, are there charitable organizations who are out there to help help folks gain access to the water without having to do this? And the first question dealt with the mass production of the filters, right? Right. So mass production of the filters can happen if you have, at least the ways that we're producing these, if you have multiple presses. There are some places that have, so you see a male and a female mold, right? So in some places they've designed these presses so you have two male molds and then one female mold, so you press and the other one is getting prepped. So you lift this up and take the filter off, okay. So you go back and forth. But I mean, you could do it, you could make like 1,000 of them if you had a big enough room and a big enough machine. It's just the cost of doing that is so extraordinary that places that need the water can't actually come up with the resources to make those kinds of machines, right?
Thinking about doing that here and then shipping it over there, but
yeah. And so what we're trying to find access, and what we're looking at, so working with the engineers, it's great because they're interested in trying to solve these kinds of problems. Right? How can we produce things faster, larger volume, but in a shorter period of time, So it's a real important issue, but right now this is about as fast as you can go, as many presses. The other issue is there are groups like, well, Filter Pure, Google Filter Pure, and Potters for Peace. Those are two organizations. They have extensions that help get water, other than doing just the filters. I would say Shoulder to Shoulder is a branch of the Rotary out of Pittsburgh. Shoulder to Shoulder does this kind of work. And then some actor by the name of Matt Damon has a group called water.org, you know. And I know that they are doing some good work. I don't know as much about that organization as I could. I want to do some more research. But certainly Filter Pure, Potters for Peace, Shoulder to Shoulder, they're doing this kind of work. Shoulder to Shoulder might be a really good group. Rotary has as one of their top interests water issues. So I know Rotarians are setting up groups in various parts of the world to help get clean water to folks who need it. But yeah, so drop me an email. I can send you some names of some other groups too.
Thank you.
Over here, yeah, question.
Noticing the shortage of precipitation here, do you feel that, or like especially this season, do you feel like there's going to be a stronger push for solving water issues, not just for here, but to encompass the world?
Yeah, probably. The issue of water and access is not going to go away, right? I think the more people who become interested in it will find different ways to access the issue and take it up in whatever way they seem that seems most useful or most viable for them. So yeah, there are places that don't have the kind of so there's an approach called rainwater harvesting. You've probably heard about this approach where folks used to call it catching rainwater in a barrel, right? But now, like engineers and other, right? But so you kind of gloss up the approach. So that's an approach that folks are using. The folks who are trying to do vertical gardens, vertical gardening, and use water as how can I say? Try to squeeze as much water out of the water that they can, right? So we visited Sweetwater the other day, yesterday. And the work that groups like Sweetwater are doing here in Milwaukee is doing kind of the same thing. Like, how do you use water, trying to milk water, or trying to squeeze water out of water constantly? There are folks who are trying to garden vertically. So you don't need a whole lot of water to make water do a lot of work for you. But in terms of getting the access for potable water and drinking water, as long as you have that interest, you'll find ways around solving that problem. Thanks. So your hand, then let's go back on this side. Yeah.
For like is any of this information available to the public domain, like what you need to do to make the press? And like I know you mentioned like the kiln and temperature requirements and stuff like. Yeah. Like I have access to a kiln and stuff like that in my own personal life. Like what can we do to help like on a home level, like rather than just giving like is there anything we can there's information online to build these filters? Yeah.
So the question is there information online to build the filter? The answer is no, it's all secret. I have to go into witness protection after tonight. I'm joking. So Potters for Peace, they have how-to guides. Download the PDFs. You go to our website, we have not only the Tampa Water Project, but the Reservoir Studio. Reservoir isn't as populated yet with the information because we just got that up and running earlier in the fall. But on the Water Project site, there's information. Filter Pure site has some of the information. There are how-to guides. You can actually do a Google search for ceramic water filters and see numerous videos. And if you need further instruction on interpretation, send me an email or come on over to Penn State. I'll give you, you can work in the reservoir. But there are how-to guides all over the place. Potters for Peace has a pretty comprehensive guide.
The other question I had to ask you is, like, I know that you said like it was 95% against bacterial, and like we said with the magic fairy dust.
Yeah.
But like I know that there's been issues with like I come from Janesville, and like I know like with like the GM plant, there's been like major, like concerns other than like bacterial. How effective are those things against things like like when the paper plants moved out, those major contaminants other than just bacterial? How effective are these filters against other things other than just bacterial?
Sure. So how effective are the filters on things other than bacteria? So pharmaceuticals, metals, chemicals? Yeah, they are horrible. They're horrible because they're only designed to deal with the microbes and the organisms. But the engineers at A&M and the engineers at Penn State, they're loving this because they have a problem to work on. And so many of them are working on how do we deal with sulfur, arsenic, pharmaceuticals, heavy metals. Can we coat the filters? Can we change the composition? Can we use something other than sawdust? So we're working on those applications. And once those become affordable, in the same ways that sawdust becomes affordable, we're going to make that public too. So, but at this point, they're not very effective for filtering those things. I think if you have like big pieces of rust, we're good at that. Right? But so heavy metals, that'll work, but the other kinds not. But that's a really important issue. There's another film. So I showed those two films, Flow and Thirst. There's another one called Green. If you're not familiar with, just Google Green. And it talks about chemical companies and factories who are dumping all kinds of waste in the Mississippi River. It's just, they're like within a very short span of geography, there are like hundreds of companies dumping chemicals into the river. So I would say check out Green as well. Plus they have this really interesting logo. It's a green garden hose, but they've fashioned it as a hangman's noose. Right? It's just a really great visual image. So I'll hand in the back. Yeah?
While you're on the topic of the fairy dust.
The fairy dust, yeah. Okay.
Can you explain what colloidal silver does? Like, is it a physical filtration device? Or like, how is it incorporated? And where do you get it?
Yeah, so colloidal silver, the fairy dust, what is it? How does it work and where do you get it? Tinkerbell is our distributor. So it's nanoparticle size, right? So you have like micro and a nano size. And essentially, silver is a natural antimicrobial. And it functions in three ways against microbes. It shuts down the reproductive system, the nervous system, and then it does something else. I think it's the nervous system, there's a reproductive system, and then it does something else. I can never remember what the third thing is, but trust me, there's a third thing that it does. I feel like it robbed me for getting my the idea is that the silver, being a natural antimicrobial, some people actually ingest small amounts of silver daily as part of their diet to deal with the microbes in their bodies. Right? Some of the vitamins or food supplements that some people take actually have silver in them. And silver being a natural antimicrobial, I always talk to my students about this idea of, you think about the feudal system, and you think about kings and queens and people drinking out of silver goblets, and you think about the peasants who did not have the silver goblets, and the people who were getting diseases more readily were the peasants and the field workers, and not, well, if you're drinking nasty water out of silver, the silver is going to do something to the microbes. So there might have been some sort of, antimicrobial action working in that. But if you ingest too much silver, you actually start turning blue. Yeah, your skin turns blue. Yeah. So you want to be careful with this pixie dust. But so the colloidal silver, yeah, it's really weird. So the colloidal silver attacks the microbes and renders them inert. So you're not going to get the disease from those agents. And so where do we get? So you can get it from all over the place. So there are a couple of distributors we've used. One in China, one in Spain. But you can make colloidal silver. Google how to make colloidal silver. You can make it. You can learn how to do it at home. You can learn anything on Google. You know that? Like those tags, those ink tags. Like if you leave a clothing store and they accidentally leave the tag on your, you can Google how to take it off without getting. You can Google anything. It's weird. You shouldn't be able to share certain information, but you can share that information. But at any rate, you can Google how to make colloidal silver. Other questions? Any questions on, yes?
How do you see shifting art curriculum from DB and AE into actually taking action? Like this was one example where you use ceramics. But in other areas or other mediums in art, how would you see that shifting to actual action instead of just studying issues and awareness? So I can see awareness more easily, but actually applying that to action.
Taking action, good question. So how do you see in other approaches to art education taking action, not just with ceramics and the water filters? So many years ago, I learned about this guy out of Auburn University, Samuel Mockbee, who was the director of the Rural Studio, an architecture program at Auburn, where second year and fifth year architecture students went out to rural Alabama, met with local folks who didn't have adequate housing in counties that were among the poorest in the country, if not, the continent, and said, look, what do you need? And they talked to these families, and they decided on a client, and sophomores started designing housing responses for a specific family with little or no money. So they had to find recycled materials, they had to find low budget ways to create housing. And in their second year, they would design and build these solutions as architecture students. Then as fifth year students, their thesis was to go back to rural Alabama, find a new project, and in one semester, design and build your solution. So they would build things like farmers markets or playgrounds. These are architecture students. So they're not just designing and drafting things and then creating balsa wood models, right? Not that there's anything wrong with that. But in response to your question, they're taking action. They build playgrounds, they build cathedrals, they would build daycare centers, facilities, they would build houses. And then you know what they do with that stuff? They give it to the family, they give it to the communities, right? That is the taking action part. So there's architecture. Can you do that with K-12 kids? You probably could do something similar. If there are people in the community that need greenhouses, could kids build the greenhouse and learn about architecture in these ways, right? So I think there are various ways you can do it. There's a group called, or a movement, Empty Bowls is another approach, right? I think that comes out of high school teachers here in Wisconsin. It's Michigan, but I'm going to say it's Wisconsin because I'm here in Milwaukee. But there are those kinds of approaches. There are people who are making films, right? So you can teach kids how to do digital video editing and do claymation. That's cool. I love doing that stuff. You can do all kinds of video work, but you could also have kids do historic research. They could do activist work, say, folks want to tear down a school or tear down a building. It has some sort of historical value to the community. And if the kids are doing the filming and interviewing, that could be kind of cool. But then it doesn't stop there. What if the kids actually show the video at the local municipal meeting, right? Well, we're the adults. We could really, let this 8-year-old tell you. Let the third grader show you the documentary that they created about why we should save this building. I don't know, maybe that might have an effect. So that's maybe borderline action, awareness, but it's also, to me, a sense of action, right? So I think there are various ways that people go about it. There's just a few that I know people are doing and have worked. There's a great book, and I think some of these things could actually be replicated in K-12 and even undergraduate programs. It's called Design Like You Give a Damn. Well, I give a damn, I design. Well, no, design like the premise is there's a collection of work in this book, Design Like You Give a Damn, based on the premise that we need affordable solutions. We need low-cost solutions to shelter, sanitation, water, housing. The water filter that I showed you, the Filtron from the Potter's piece design is in that book. I think it's $15 to $20, right, for each unit. A Brita water filter, that's like $15 or $20, and then every 3 months you got to buy a new filter, right? But this one lasts several years for the same amount of money. In that same book, there are examples of housing. So, you walk down the street. If you ever walk down the street and you have that Marilyn Monroe moment where the air vent shoots up hot air and you go, ooh, right? You can capture that air in these tubes and make inflatable housing for homeless folks. An example of that is in the book. That's kind of cool. They're called parasites, S-I-T-E-S, right? So parasites.
You're talking about everything we show in this class.
Isn't that great?
Microactives was here a couple years ago.
Isn't that awesome? It's an amazing approach. Or,
Just read about Melchin.
Melchin, oh,
and architecture design.
Sweet, wonderful stuff. It's those kind of examples, right? Check out the book Design Like You Give a Damn. There's a water pump in there, right? So every community has kids, or most every, except for like retirement communities, but every other community has kids, right? And kids are like running around doing all kinds of stuff. And there are some communities that have water, but they don't have the machinery or the mechanism to pump the water. Some folks designed a merry-go-round that the kids go around and play, and it activates the pump and it pumps the water. Yeah, I don't know how child labor laws are interested in this, but I think it's kind of a cool solution, right? So, just design like you give a damn. I think that's some really good examples. Other thoughts, questions? Wow, packed house, I love it. This is great. Thanks, really appreciate it. Drop me an email.